All right, well, let's go to Athens, Georgia, guys. Let's look at between the hedges. We've got Georgia and Ole Miss, a top 10 matchup as Georgia takes on Ole Miss. This is a 6 o'clock game on ESPN. Guys, you look at the stats and the rank, or well, not the stats. You look at the rankings on paper and you go, oh, this should be a good game Saturday. And then you start to look into the metrics, and I think Ole Miss is going to have to work to make this a competitive ball game. Georgia's favored by 11 and a half right now. And as we dive into the X's and O's here, without a doubt, this is the last true test, I think, between Georgia and certainly Atlanta. All they need is one more win and they clinch up the SEC East. But I think this is the last true test between Georgia and a playoff spot. Uh, Ole Miss may really be up against it statistically. Trey, when you look at what both teams are averaging points per game and then what they're averaging as far as a key metric and third down conversions, I think you got to be really concerned if you're the Rebs.
Yeah, both teams are scoring a lot of points, over 40 a game. So the offense is there for both teams, but defensively, Georgia has a huge advantage in this game, allowing only 15 points per game. Ole Miss is 22. And Ole Miss, against more potent competition, has looked even, allowed even more points. I'm thinking back to the LSU game. I know that they're going up against a Heisman contender quarterback, but they're allowing 49 points in a victory. They gave up 35 to an Aggie offense last week that was sputtering going into that game. And A&M was running for 9-10 yards a carry in the second half as they wore down that Ole Miss defense. So I'm concerned about that for Ole Miss, and especially if they can, if the third down disparity is going to be as big as it looks like on paper. Jackson Dart has been very poor on third down this year, converting those passes. Not all of it's been his fault. Definitely last week there were a couple drops and opportunities to convert, but overall on offense, they're converting just 36% of the time. Georgia converts 55. Shout out Sammy Hagar, 55% of the time.
Unreal.
That's unheard of. That's NCAA 14 numbers on offense. So that's going to tell the story. If Ole Miss can find a way to stay on the field, they're going to be fine, and they're going to put up some points on Georgia. We've seen Georgia be vulnerable at times. Missouri was able to move the ball. Auburn was able to move the ball. But if they cannot stay on the field, it's going to be a long afternoon or evening for them in Athens. And Georgia's just going to do what Georgia does. They're going to slow cook them.
Garrett, it feels like if Ole Miss has a chance to compete in this game, let alone win, Quinshon Judkins, who had a very nice week last week against Texas A&M, he's going to have to really step it up.
No, for sure. It's your best player, Quinshon Judkins, and you have to be able to, you know, use your best players in these big spots. That was something I was, planning on highlighting coming into this one. Guys, when they played Alabama and lost their only game of the season, Quinshon Judkins got 13 carries. He was a little bit banged up, wasn't quite 100%, but he got, 14 total touches. He had one catch. That's not good enough for your best player. And as the season's gone on and against some really solid, defensive units, Quinshon Judkins has had a pretty good season. He's kind of been coming back. He's kind of finding form. And he had a great game against an Aggie defense last week that for whatever you want to say about A&M, stopping the run was not one of their problems up until they played Quinshon Judkins. And so, I don't want to hear, oh, it's Georgia, so they're just so much better than anyone else they've played. There's no chance. Ole Miss absolutely has a puncher's chance in this game. Quinshon Judkins, if he does his thing, can go off and have a great game, keep Ole Miss in this game for the majority of the time. And look, Jackson Dart, he's got his problems. He's been up and down. But the things that travel best are going to be your defense and are going to be your run game. Well, for Ole Miss, you don't have a defense, so you're not factoring that in the first place. But your run game can travel. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to try to take the air out of the ball a little bit. I think they're going to try to play a little bit physical with Georgia. I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to run like a slow tempo offense, but I think they're going to run the ball somewhat effectively. So I think that Ole Miss can keep this one close. I don't think that this is as big of a lay down game for Ole Miss or for Georgia as you could possibly think, just looking at the numbers on face value.
Ole Miss still technically has a chance at the SEC West. They need help, and they certainly have to win this game. You know, you could say the same about Lane Kiffin that we said about James Franklin, that we accidentally said about Jimbo Fisher. He kind of folds like a cheap table in the biggest games. And listen, Ole Miss is not built like the Georgias, like the Alabamas. They've certainly competed year to year and are always good for an upset, but it just doesn't feel like this Georgia team is in the mood to mess around. Certainly not at home. They're the more physical team, they're the more talented team. We move into our picks here, and I'm not concerned about who's winning this game, at least on paper. I'm concerned about that number, the 11.5. Garrett, Trey and I are rolling with the dogs at home. You are going to roll with the Lane train. Explain why.
They've kept it, pretty competitive in a lot of these big games. They've only lost one so far. Yes, it was to Bama. Yes, it was on the road. Yes, they lost by 2 touchdowns. But like I said, they didn't have a fully healthy Quinshon, and I don't think they really knew their identity at the time. Since then, they've won some really big games. They've put up a lot of points. I just don't think this is an Ole Miss team that rolls over and loses by 10. I don't think that's what they are. I think they'll lose the game. I do think that they'll end up losing to Georgia. I don't think they go in there and surprise them and shock the world. But I think they'll lose by maybe a touchdown or so and be in this game late and maybe watch a late interception from Jackson Dart or not quite converting on a 4th down or something like that, just to keep them competitive. Look, are they going to maybe get flamed by 20 just because I'm saying that? And then, I'm going to have to eat crow on this? Yeah, maybe. But I just kind of believe that they can put up points. They put up points pretty much all year long, and I think they'll keep it going against Georgia as well.
Trey,
The
you've been remarkably polite to Lane. Any shots here as we get ready to move on?
No shot. He's earned me shutting up a little bit. I think I might take a victory lap if this one's how I think it turns out. But
Sure.
the victory, the cover recipe and maybe even the victory recipe for Ole Miss is certainly the Auburn recipe, where they were able to find a way. Whatever Auburn found schematically really worked. And it was that combined with getting a couple takeaways, as Garrett said. If they can find that, then they're going to be right in this game. I just don't think that Georgia's the same team that played Auburn. They've grown throughout the year. They kind of fell asleep a little bit against Mizzou last week, and Mizzou, put some pressure on them, but talent won out in the end. And I think the same thing happens this week.
Gracious,